everyone, welcome back to JP Reacts, where we look at Reddit and see what people are talking about in the realm of politics and religion. Today is a religious one from, actually, r/religion. So let's jump right into it and see what it's all about. The headline of the post is, does anyone else see glaring similarities between fervent atheists and religious fundamentalists? Well, that's an interesting question. I don't particularly understand what it is, but let's talk a little bit about it after this. Okay, so again, the question generally was, are there glaring similarities between fervent atheists and religious fundamentalists? Again, I'm not entirely sure why that would be, because religious fundamentalists obviously stick to the religious dogma and training and books and all that stuff, and they're very ardent, strong believers. Where fervent atheists are more of, they can be jerks online, I guess, and they can be angry sometimes, but they're not really in the same book or same boat. Let's look to see what exactly he means by this. Okay, here's the rest of the post. It says, take the story of Noah's Ark. A fundamentalist Christian will say Noah was a real person and he actually built an ark. An atheist will say there's no way one man could actually build that big of a boat and put every animal on earth in it. One group accepts the claims, the other rejects them, but both groups find the text to be the same thing, a literal, not metaphorical account. Edit, this post is not an argument for God. If you think it is, read it again. So looking at it from that point of view, I could see how that could be an interpretation, that both are taking it literally when it's clearly a metaphorical story in the Bible. It's not a true life story of the Bible. So, but we got to keep in mind that usually when an atheist is responding to that type of story, that it's in response to a Christian taking the literal message of the story and saying that it literally happened that way, that there was a literal global flood and that there was a literal ark, and that Noah was able to take get two of every animal on the ark, and they, however long the ark, I can't remember the details of the story, but that's what it is. And when atheist was responding to something like that, it's talking more about a response to that interpretation rather than a response to the metaphorical or folklore interpretation of that story. So when an atheist is saying it can't literally happen, like where would all the poop go type of situation, right? It's because it's in a response to what the literalist Christian view is of that situation. And the same could be said for a lot of stories in the Bible. Yeah, there are Christians who take certain stories as metaphor and are just stories. They're not actual literal events as they took place, both in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And as an atheist, when you're confronted with somebody that you're talking about these things with, you usually go with what the claim is. So if the claim was that it's a metaphor, then you talk about it in that way. Like, how do you tell the difference between the stories in the Bible that are metaphors and which ones are supposed to be taken as literal truth, right? And you have a conversation around that. Whereas if somebody's saying that this literally happened, that there was an ark, there was a global flood and all the related parts of the story, then you have a conversation based on what that Christian says. That Christian says it literally happened, so you have the argument around it didn't literally happen, right? And you talk about just logistics of the whole thing and all the stuff that goes into it and how there's no evidence of a global flood, all that good stuff. So let's kind of look. There's a comment on here that I thought kind of brings a good perspective. So let's take a look at that comment. This person's comment is, I'm not going to be able to pronounce Radui. It looks like they're labeled as agnostic pagan, whatever that means. So it says, somewhat, but to be fair to atheists, a lot of this is because the new atheist movement arose as a reaction to the increased prominence of creationism in the public sphere in the US and the UK. This meant they were primarily engaging with religious fundamentalists who interpreted the Bible literally, so it makes sense that they would focus on that. In fact, there was a recent post on r/ex-Catholic lamenting the fact the lack of atheist apologetics focused on Catholicism, as the majority of freely available atheist resources were focused on a particular kind of mostly American Protestant mentality, and I would add to that mostly Southern Baptist mentality. It helps, of course, that the atheist apologetic point of view, it's easy to fight the literalist straw man. Also, I've seen very solid philosophical-based atheist arguments critiquing religious philosophical arguments on atheist sites over the years. So not all atheists are relying on that kind of literal straw man either. The ones who do rely on those arguments do tend to be somewhat glib and annoying, though, so it makes sense you might remember them more. And that's true. There are quite a few atheists out there that can be glib and annoying and overly sarcastic. You probably run across some of those online. But when it comes to these types of things, you got to remember from an atheist perspective, somebody that was, for a lot of times, formerly in those religions, especially early on when they're just coming out of those religions and realizing that they are deconverting and becoming atheists themselves, they're angry. And they feel like they have a right to be angry. They feel like they've been lied to their entire life. And they may be angry at their parents, the church, or whatever, but the anger is not they're mad at God or anything. They're mad that they feel like they were lied to, and that their whole life they've been lied to. So when you come across somebody that's newly deconverted from a fundamentalist or any type of religion, you can keep that in mind. As people progress through atheism, they tend to mellow out. You can find some of those atheists online as well. But it's for the most part, especially if you're looking online, when we're talking about atheists, again, like I mentioned in some of the other videos I posted about this topic, is they're an atheist on a lack of belief in the God. They're not saying there is no God. There are a few that are saying there are no God. And if you're going by the philosophical, like in the textbook definition, that is the literal, that's because they need specific definitions for things. So it'd be an agnostic would be the position in the literal textbook definition of most atheists. But in the colloquial version, the way the word's being used nowadays, atheist is the lack of belief in God, not saying that there are no gods. So hopefully we can kind of get past the definitional arguments of these things and look past when people are arguing about a specific point. It may not be able to be generalized. It may be about that specific point. When you're talking to a literalist, you have to make the points based on their argument. So it may not be able to be generalized. And when a lot of times people say Christians, it could be based on that argument. So a lot in the United States, especially because there's a lot of evangelicals in the United States, you hear when they say Christians, most of the time they're talking about evangelicals. They'd have different arguments if they're talking specifically about Lutherans or Methodists or Catholics or any of the other Christian sects. But the fact that evangelicals are a very large and vocal part of the Christian community in the United States, and I think in the UK too, that's why when a lot of times when atheists online are talking about Christians, that's the subset of Christians they're usually referring to as the evangelical Christians. But what do you think? Do you think that atheists can be as fervent